All right, let's get right into it. We're tackling the quantitative aptitude section for IPMAT Indore. The one section that gives everyone a bit of a headache. But here's the deal. Instead of just throwing generic advice at you, we're going to dig into the hard data from the last 3 years of actual exams to build a genuinely smart, focused strategy. So you open up the QA syllabus and it's just massive, right? It's so easy to feel completely overwhelmed, wondering, where do I even start? How in the world do you cut through all that noise and actually focus on the things that are going to get you the score you want?
Well, here's the secret, and it's a game changer. The goal isn't to become a walking encyclopedia of every single topic. I mean, who has time for that? The real key, the way you actually win, is by identifying and absolutely mastering the topics that show up again and again. It's all about working smarter, not just harder.
To do that, we need proof. We need data. So we've gone ahead and analyzed the actual IPMAT Indore question papers from 2023, 2024, and 2025. This isn't guesswork. This is a clear, data-backed breakdown of what the exam actually looks like.
And wow, does this data tell a story? Just look at this chart. We've broken down the whole QA section into its main categories. And one of these bars just towers over the rest. It's not even close. Algebra and higher maths is the undisputed king of this exam. Its dominance is just impossible to ignore.
Okay, so that was the picture. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty numbers behind it. This table shows you the exact question count year by year. Look at that top row. Algebra and higher maths consistently pulling in 16 to 20 questions. The next closest challenger is way behind. And then look way down at the bottom. Number system with just 1 or 2 questions. This table right here is basically our treasure map. So, with that map in hand, where do we start? Simple. We start with the big dogs, the heavyweights. These are the topics that are completely non-negotiable. They are the absolute foundation of a high score.
If you forget everything else from this explainer, please remember this one thing. IPMAT Indore is an algebra-heavy exam, period. Your entire prep strategy, everything you do for the QA section, has to revolve around the single, undeniable fact.
So when we say algebra, what do we really mean? Your bread and butter is going to be basic algebra. So things like surds, logs, polynomials. Then you need to hit quadratic equations, functions, and especially sequence and series, which has been popping up more and more. And the good news on matrices and determinants, you really just need the basics. They're not trying to trick you with super deep questions here.
Now, just as important as knowing what to study is knowing what you can safely push to the back burner. Trust me, topics like inequalities and binomial theorem, the data shows they just have a really low weightage. Spending tons of time grinding these out is just not a good return on your investment.
But wait, there's another heavyweight in the ring, and it's probably not what you'd expect. It's logical reasoning-based data interpretation, or LRDI. For the last few years, this has been a solid block of 8 questions, usually broken into 2 sets. And here's why this is so huge. Algebra can sometimes feel like climbing a mountain, right? But LRDI is often way more approachable. It's about logic puzzles. With some focused practice, these 8 questions are one of the most direct paths to banking serious points. This is a golden opportunity you absolutely cannot afford to miss. All right, so once you've got a really firm grip on those heavyweights, it's time to build out the rest of your score. Let's talk about priority 2, the core topics. These are what will give you that solid, well-rounded performance. In modern maths, your number 1 focus has to be permutation and combination, or PNC. Why? Because it's a 2-for-1 deal. Not only does it show up on its own, but its concepts are the absolute foundation for solving probability questions. You master PNC, and you're pretty much halfway to mastering probability too. And what about set theory? Well, think of it like a pop quiz. It doesn't show up consistently, but when it does, the questions are usually pretty straightforward. You don't need to spend weeks on it. A little bit of practice is usually enough to handle whatever they might throw at you. Moving on to arithmetic. Now, this is a huge category, but the data tells us exactly where to zero in. For the highest returns on your study time, you want to master percentage, simple and compound interest, and profit, loss, and discount. That's where the action is. And it's a similar story for our last core group here. Even though this section is officially called Geometry, Mensuration, and Trigonometry, let's be real. The data shows the lion's share of questions comes from just geometry and mensuration. So that's where your focus should be. Finally, let's talk about the topics that require the most strategic thinking. Priority 3,
the wildcards. This is where we see a massive disconnect between what everyone talks about and what actually shows up on the exam.
This right here is so important for any smart test taker. There is so much hype around the number system. Coaching centers love to teach it. The problems can be fun. But what does the actual IPMAT Indore exam data say? It's crystal clear. For years, its weightage has been consistently low. We're talking 1 or 2 questions max.
So, does that mean you just ignore it completely? Not quite. The smart way to think about it is this. Number system isn't the star player, it's the support crew. Its concepts, things like factors and remainders, are super useful tools for solving problems in bigger, more important areas, like arithmetic or PNC. It's a toolkit, not a main event. Okay, we have gone through a ton of data. So how do we pull this all together into a simple, winning game plan? Let's lay out the final strategy. It really all boils down to this simple 3-step pyramid. Step 1, your foundation, the base of everything, is to absolutely master the heavyweights, algebra and LRDI. Step 2 is to build on top of that with your core topics, the high-yield stuff from modern math, arithmetic, and geometry. And finally, at the very top, you use the wildcards, like number systems strategically, as a tool, not as your main focus. So there you have it, a strategy that's not based on hype or what feels right, but on hard data. You now know exactly where the highest concentration of marks is hiding in that giant syllabus. So the only question left is, how are you going to use this information to change your study plan, starting today?